it's Natasha and thank you so much for joining me today. Well, we have a cracker today, and this is one of those videos where you need to trust the process. I think you're going to be questioning me probably most of the way through this, but I love this. The outcome of these cards is gorgeous. So today we are going to be using a tail comb. A household tail comb. Now this is one admittedly that I use for crafts. This is not a hair one, but it is a hair comb. Now I am also going to be using some acrylic paints. I am leaning towards using the Dina Wakley ones these days. This is all I have. I love the size of them. I love the consistency of them, but I also have some other brands thrown in there too. I also love that these have a little fine kind of point to them, and this just makes life really easy. So this is, I'm just going to create some backgrounds for you, and then we are turning these into cards. But all I do is put the paint down, and then there are so many different effects that you can create using a comb. Now this is a fine tooth comb, so obviously there's going to be lots of detail. Now when these dry, I'm going to tell you the texture is amazing. I can actually run my finger over these and you can hear sound like if I run a fingernail over them. There is so much texture, and it is fun to touch. It is gorgeous to look at. It catches the light. These are so much fun and pretty addictive, I'm not going to lie. Now, there was no rhyme or reason as to how I was setting out the paint. It's a little bit of trial and error as to how much paint you want to add on there, and just go for gold. I kind of just swipe across, see what I get, cover up some of the white background, and then you can get extra little effects, add a bit more paint if you need to add more paint, and then sometimes if you add a bit more paint to the actual comb, you can add that on top and get another pattern. Literally the options are endless here. So much gorgeous texture, and you can just keep going and going and going. You do have to be a little bit careful, obviously, if you keep going forever, that you will probably mix your colors together, but really it's all about experimenting. Here I have literally scribbled on the paint and then just kind of get a background coating, give or take. So of course, I mean, you could do this using anything. You don't have to do this using the comb. But then I just run through it, and I thought I wanted to add a little bit more definition to the color because it had all sort of become one color for a little bit. So now I'm going to straighten out the back and then add a little bit of the dark blue paint across the actual comb. So just a tiny little bit, and then zigzag this through, and I love the outcome. So simple, and as I said, sometimes once you get to the stage you have to remember to kind of mess with it less. So you get what you get, and then just hold on. Once you like it, pop it aside and let it dry. These honestly took no time at all to dry. It is winter here in New Zealand at the moment, so not very good drying weather, but these dried perfectly fine. The paint is actually not very thick. You just get great texture. Now you can do it from the sides, you can do dots, you can do lines, top, from the side, anything. Just have a play around and you get these stunning, gorgeous results. As I said, sometimes once I got something I like, it's kind of time to stop and pop this to the side. Now I know that you're thinking at this point, interesting, let's see how she does this. And I'm going to pop these aside and then work on my focal points. Now truly, the world is your oyster at this point. Go for gold. I have out a couple of the butterflies. These are from the Mini Wings collection. And then I also have the mini scented blooms, I think this one is called. These are smaller versions, individual flowers of larger full page stamps that you can get. Really good value because there's just little stamps in them. They have a really low cost point, and that works out well for me. I use these endlessly because they can just be used in so many different ways. I'm stamping these out in some VersaFine Onyx black ink onto a piece. I think I did use some watercolor cardstock for this. It's not that important because I'm not going to absolutely saturate these, but I am going to use my acrylic paint for this. Now I have put some clear embossing powder over top, mainly because I like doing this, but because I wasn't exactly sure how the acrylics would interact with the inks, and the way that if I don't want to find something out, I just seal it in with some embossing powder. So I'm going to melt this, and it goes all nice and shiny, and you know it's going to be perfectly melted. I'm going to take some of the colors that I used in the beginning as well. It doesn't matter which acrylic paints you are using, and of course You can use whatever medium you want to decorate these. But I must admit, I'm on an acrylic paint feast at the moment with my crafting, because there's just so much you can do with it, and these little bottles go on endlessly. I've never replaced any. I've had these for months and months and months and been using them non-stop. I absolutely love them, and I really like the colors. I love the consistency of the paint. Even when I'm watering it down like this, there is still lots and lots of color. Now I want to get the very weakest amount of color in the outside. I'm just really using water. There is water in that little cup up there, and I have my non-stick mat down with a tiny little dab of each of those acrylic paints, and then I'm really just fluffing with the paints, adding little bits here and there where I think so. I add a little bit of water to the lime green paint and then just colour in the leaves. Nothing fancy here. And then all I'm going to do is do the same with that slightly darker green, add a blob of water in to make it really watered down, and then just add one stroke down the middle and we're done. The water moves the rest of it. These acrylics somehow are amazing for watercolour. So that's pretty much what I'm going with here. I'm watering down the yellow significantly too. Now I want this to be really watered down because this way we can add some shading just using the exact same paint. So if you have a little bit too much on there, give it a dab up and then just spread around. I spread it around the current colour with a little bit more water, and then I'm going to do an orange one up the top. Again, this is extremely watered down and still a gorgeous colour. Now once I have done the orange one, I come back with a little bit more full strength, except it has lots of water in it still, and I'm going to add a little bit of shading, which just means a little bit more concentrated colour towards the inside of the butterfly, and then I just wick it out with a tiny little bit of water so it kind of blends into the lighter colour there in the background, and then this is my butterflies done. So no kind of ink required here. This is all acrylic paints to paint these, and a paintbrush and some water. So just the exact same acrylic paints that we used to create the backgrounds. Then I am going to fussy cut these images out. Now I love the flower and the leaf, but I'm not fussy cutting that extra little foliage, so I'm just going to cut this one off for today. These are really easy shapes to go around because there's no little zigzag edges. It's just all straight kind of curved cutting, which is my type of fussy cutting. And then when I'm fussy cutting with a black outline where I've stamped my image in black, going around the outside like this is a lifesaver. This will make your fussy cutting 10 times better automatically. So it just covers up all those extra little white bits where you might have turned just as a little too hard or you missed a little bit. It's going to cover all of that, so make sure you come in from the back of your stamped image just in case your pen slips and you don't want to ruin your image. I have cut out my butterflies too, but I'm just colouring in the antennae because I made them much thicker than need be. That was just easier to cut out. I didn't want to cut them off because I still want the antennae, but I certainly didn't want to cut those tiny little fine images out. So I cut them a little bit wider and then just coloured them in with the black pen, and no one will be any the wiser. So now that we have our focal points, I know that you're still thinking, this is interesting, I'm not sure, I'm still not sold. Well, hold on, we're getting there, I promise, I promise. Now the texture on these is gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. So I am going to cut these down a little bit because at the moment the edges are a little bit rough. I do like that detail, but I am one of those people who really loves to have a good frame on my cards, and my cards are 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches. That's the size of my card base that I create, and so in order to have a good frame, I usually cut around 1/4 of an inch off each side, if not an eighth, depending on how much room I kind of have to spare. Now I round the corners for these ones. You can see there is a little bit of white poking through where some of the paint didn't get covered. I don't think this bothers me at all. In the end, you won't even notice this, so even if your background is not perfect, you can certainly use it. Now I have this piece of vellum here, and you know when you put something on your desk and you think, I need to use this up so that it's not just hanging around. Well, today's the day for this piece of vellum. I had ripped it off something else, obviously, and then I'm just going to use the majority of it to create a little line down my painted background. This is a fairly dark background, and it's also fairly intense, so that's why I decided to add this little bit of vellum just to break it up a little bit. Now I have put a little bit of double-sided tape on the back here just so that I can fold this over, get it exactly where I want it to go. Now all I've done at the moment is the top and the bottom, and when I end up putting on my focal images, you'll see what I do about the bulking, the kind of bowing that happens when you add vellum like this. But nonetheless, I'm putting this down onto a card base. You can see that chunky white border. I love a big white border, especially since our background is so intense. So once I've got that on, I'm ready for my focal points. Now, do you think I could decide if the orange should go up the top or the yellow should go up the top? Now, I hold these around and then I switch them around and then I switch them back. So this happens to everybody when you just can't decide. And at some point, you just need to pop them down. And that's what I did. Now, if I move this to the side, you can see there is a bit of bowing behind there. Now, this is not something I love, so I am going to take a little piece of double-sided tape and just kind of curl it around my finger, take off the release paper, curl it around and pop this underneath the butterfly, and this will just stop that bowing because it's not super important, but I just feel like the card looks much more finished if everything is secure, super secure. Now, for the minute, I'm going to pop this one aside and move on to the next one. We're not quite finished though. Now, again, I'm going to pop some double-sided tape on the back here. I always use my method where I can put the 4 little strips around the outside and then take away a little tail on each one, and then this way I am able to line this up, and then when I have everything perfectly lined up and even, all 4 sides are nice and even, then I can pull out the tabs and everything is completely lined up and nothing is skew off, and I won't have to look at it and it won't bug me. So it is nice and straight. And then with this one, this is pretty simple. I'm going to keep these pretty clean and simple. I had a whole lot of fun creating these backgrounds. I mean, just look at that texture. So fun. Anyway, this flower is good to go. I'm going to keep this one pretty flat because this one I will be popping through the mail. So just some double-sided tape on the back of my flower. And then for the sentiments, I'm again going with some paper rose, all occasions. These are so handy because sometimes by the time I get to the end of all my card making, I am just running out of energy to be able to stamp, emboss, and then cut out some of the sentiments. So for these ones, all I have to do is cut and go. I have a hip hip hooray just on this gorgeous little sentiment, partially tucked under one of the little butterflies, and then for the other one I have a gorgeous little happy birthday. I think these are really simple, clean cards, and I really want to showcase the backgrounds. That is the fun part here. It's the part that we had all that joy creating, and I think this showcases them really well whilst still keeping the cards nice and interesting. So I'm just going to pop my little sentiment here across the flower, and then these ones are good to go. What do you think of these cards? Did you think they were going to turn out okay, or were you a little bit suspicious? Did you trust the process? Let me know in the comment section down below. As always, I will have supplies down below as well. Other than that, thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you in the next video. Thanks, bye!